Hey, welcome to Tank Talk. I'm your host, Bob Tankard. And today's guest is a special longtime friend, Kurt Cetroulo. So Kurt is an individual that takes me back over 50 years, back to Newark, New Jersey. The same neighborhood, growing up on the same streets, the same neighborhood, knowing some of the same people. And I said to myself, how did Kurt get to Martha's Vineyard? You know what I mean? So Kurt, welcome to the show. And Kurt, tell me something.
Thank you.
How did you get to Martha's Vineyard?
Well, in 1978, all of the obstetricians on the island retired. And so they needed OBGYN coverage. And they called one of my colleagues in Boston. And since I was in academic medicine, I was able to put together a group of 10 people. And we covered the OBGYN service at the hospital for over a year until they hired somebody. And first they hired a Susan McCoy and then Jason Liu, who actually became a very good friend of mine.
And Jason stayed.
Oh yeah, Jason was here for years.
Yeah, he stayed and got a big house in Oak Bluffs on the water.
I know, that's right. And we're still good friends to this day.
You know, so tell me something. How did you find out, other than what your practice was, how did you find out about the vineyard? What made you come and want to stay here?
Well,
because when you were in Boston, evidently when a friend of yours told you about this place, you had not yet bought here yet.
Correct.
And had you been here yet?
I think maybe we were here once on a bus tour, and it was a rainy day. But I really liked the place, but we didn't spend a lot of time here yet. But once we were covering, we would be down here for the weekend or sometimes a week at a time.
Right.
And you know, sometimes it wasn't very busy, and I got to,
especially in the winter back then,
ride around the place. And you know, one weekend I asked the realtor to take me around. She showed me a place. She said the builder was going away on Monday, make him an offer, he'll hold the lease and everything else. So I said, okay. And I called my wife up. I said, Terry, I just bought a house on the vineyard. She said, what? What are you, crazy?
No, the best thing you ever did.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's absolutely the truth.
And at the right time.
Oh, it was 1979, I think.
Right. The market was still manageable back then.
That's
you know what I mean?
And then I actually delivered somebody else who was in real estate, and he said, I got this deal going on in Chilmark. Let's buy some land together. And I did that. That was the second best thing, investment I ever made.
That's right.
So that was great.
You know, one thing when I was in the school system at that time. I came out of the military, and I came out of the school system. I got into the school system in '72, and when we had the bridge incident with Kennedy, and then we had the movie Jaws, and I said, and then people found out where Martha's Vineyard was, and they started coming.
Yeah. So
about 1978. The superintendent of schools and I were good friends. He was my basketball coach, and I said, you know, Coach, I said, I think, you know, the school system should buy about 10 houses while the market's still low. I said, you know, the prices are starting to rise from 14,000, now they're up to around 50, 60,000, and they're starting to go up. I said, you know, you should think about it. And he told me, no, don't worry about that. A year and a half later, he came to me, he said, how did you know? I said, if you couldn't see what was happening.
It's an island.
I said, you didn't see what's happening, and all the people that started coming and then bringing their friends and seeing what was happening. I said, you know, I don't know that. You know, he said, you're right. He said, we should have bought 10 houses because we used to get like 20, 25 applicants for jobs.
And they couldn't find housing.
Couldn't find housing. It started getting that you had 3 applicants for a position or 4 and whatnot. And that was it. It was terrible because, or they couldn't find them or they couldn't afford them. You know, guys were selling their houses off island for $200,000 and nice sized houses and coming to the vineyard and having to spend $350,000 for a garage.
Yeah.
And they said, well, no, I can't do this, you know. So tell me something. You're running for the Board of Health in Chilmark.
Yes.
What made you do that?
Well, I'm a retired physician. I was on the faculty at Tufts University School of Medicine for years. And when I'm at my best really when I'm an educator. And there's so many things going on right now with COVID and, you know, the cyanobacteria in the ponds that are having issues, and now even in the tick infestation. And so I had the idea that I could bring some of that to the Board of Health. And my son actually wrote something that's going to be published in the Gazette, if I could just read it. He's writing something about his day on the vineyard just recently, and he says, continuing the day up in Chilmark, Dr. Kurt Cetroulo, my father, was excited to be campaigning for the Chilmark Board of Health and preparing for his upcoming interview appearance on a local TV station. Win or lose, he was invigorated after a long COVID winter, excited to try and make a difference for the island he loves. And that's probably the basic reason that I would like to do that.
But think about it. You have a medical background. So in your medical background, you have a lot of input, a lot of research work in the things that are affecting the island, especially right now, the COVID. You know what I mean? Because there are people on the island that have mixed feelings about that. Some people don't want, I know people that don't want to take it. Some people that say, you better take it. Some people saying, oh, it's a phony, it's this, that, and the other. And from a doctor's perspective, what would you give the community of Martha's Vineyard? Because even though you're in Chilmark and running in Chilmark, I know for a fact that all the Board of Healths work together to try to combat whatever affects Martha's Vineyard.
Well, I think there's a real thing which is called COVID fatigue.
Okay.
Where it's exactly what point you make is that, you know, people have worn these masks for so long and done all these good things for so long. And, you know, I can understand how they're getting a little tired of that. And so I think we need to up the education again to the point. And there's actually a very good article by the American Journal of Medicine that says what physicians would like their patients to know about COVID-19. And it goes into the scientific evidence for wearing masks and washing and social distancing and travel. You know, especially if you've gotten the vaccination. The Center for Disease Control now has new guidelines. If you've gotten the vaccination, you don't have to quarantine. You still should be wearing a mask and social distancing. But all those things seem to change almost on a daily basis. And so I think it's important to be able to explain that. I think I'd love to do a podcast here on some of those issues. And, you know, and then there's this cyanobacteria, which I'm sure you've heard of. In fact, Chilmark Pond had some very serious cases. And that goes to the water supply on the vineyard and how important that is to keep that healthy and not contaminated with nitrogen and all these things that can change that.
I want to ask you about that. My doctor on the island, her son went crabbing up in the pond last year, but he went not in the Quansu area pond, it's the one that connects it further up. And he got this strange rash and he was bloated and everything else. And the way she talked, like he almost died. Is that what you're talking about? Is in the pond?
Yes, that actually was reported in the Martha's Vineyard Times, and it said, man visits Chilmark Pond and gets very ill. He was delirious, and he went home, and he did it at night, so he didn't see what was in the pond.
Exactly.
And actually 2 people got really, really sick, and they actually had a dog go in and die. So this can be a serious thing. If too much nitrogen gets in these ponds on the island, and there's 87 ponds on Martha's Vineyard. There's 27 salt brackish, and there's 60 fresh water. And if too much nitrogen gets in any of them, they have what's called the cyanobacteria bloom, which is a toxic thing to people and to animals. And so we need to be really, really vigilant about trying to, you know, correct that, diagnose it. And there's some great resources on the island. Great Pond Foundation.
How would you get rid of that?
Well,
like up in Edgartown, Great Pond, up in Quansu, they usually open up the opening and then they flush it like, it's like a flushing.
Well, that's one of the most important things to be able to do. But some of the ponds you can't do that, for they're not close enough to the ocean. So, but that's exactly what the right thing to do. And Edgartown Pond does that a lot, and it works.
Edgartown does it, but where I think this gentleman got his,
it was Chilmark Pond.
Yeah, but it was further up. Plus, you know, it connects to San Quansu because you got to go under the bridge and you walk in this little channel and then it opens up again. But I don't know how close that is to the ocean to be able to cut through it. I don't think you can.
Yeah,
I think it was up there that it might have settled in, and I know for a fact that the opening had already closed.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. And there's also the University of New Hampshire is actually doing what they're calling a community-based project on the island to test the ponds, probably on a daily basis, with a group of community volunteers who might be interested in doing something like that. So it's kind of an exciting time to be here to try to solve that kind of problem. And one of the things that I am committed to doing is listening to people and learning, but more than listening, hearing what people say and what their issues and problems are. And I know lots of farmers and fishermen and lobstermen and landscapers and contractors and all sorts of small business owners. And so I would like to be in a position where I would listen and hear what they say, hear what their concerns are, and then learn from that, and then try to make an impact in helping. For years, I've had some friends that were fishermen, both in the big ocean and those that were fishermen in the ponds. They either were fishing clams, short shell, hard shell clams, and whatnot. And then for years, they kept saying the nitrogen level in the ponds is too high. And I asked them, I said, well, what's causing that? He said, well, the houses that are too close to the pond, they're building houses too close to the pond, and the sewage from their houses are seeping down into the water. Is that absolutely
the main
that's true?
cause?
It's the wastewater from human waste that is probably responsible for 50% of the high nitrogen levels in these ponds. But you can measure that and you can correct that, and that's what these projects are all about. And I think so it's a solvable problem. And actually there's a really, really good paper that people should read. It's called Island Blue Pages. And it goes over exactly what everybody can do to safeguard the water on this island. And they're all very, very important things to do. And it's like 25 pages long, but it's perfect for understanding everything.
How would a person on the island that lives next to the pond, close to the pond, how could they make the change?
Well,
how could they help making the change?
The first thing is not to use fertilizers on their lawns that are high in nitrogen. And I think most of the landscapers that I know on the island don't use those toxic ingredients for fertilizing. They use organic that doesn't do that. But the homeowner themselves should insist on that whoever comes to fertilize their property.
But could the Board of Health do the same thing?
Absolutely.
The Board of Health, you say you're a Board of Health man in Chilmark now.
No, I'm not. I'm running.
I'm running, but I'm just saying.
I'm a candidate.
Yeah, candidate. But I'm saying just for example, you're on the Board of Health, and now you're saying one of the things that we're going to recommend and mandate is people that are going to fertilize their lawns and everything, they're going to use natural organic stuff and not this other stuff.
Yes.
To put up, because that would help perpetuate good health in the ponds.
Yes.
And take away that.
Absolutely. Now, the other issue with that is that it's interesting that these Board of Health have a lot of power. Once they pass something, nobody can appeal it or challenge it.
Right.
So if they pass something like you have suggested, that would work. And it would go a long, long way to solving the problem. And that's exactly what should be done by all the boards of health, not only in Chilmark, but all of them.
The other thing is, we have certain ponds. We have actually certain towns. We know that Edgartown was the first town that went into the drainage system, putting in sewage.
Right.
And they have a big plant in Edgartown. So they're the first one. They took care of their downtown probably 30, 40 years ago. They knew that was happening. There was a lot of flooding, this, that, and the other. The restaurants were suffering and everything else, so they took that out. Oak Bluffs became the second town to improve their downtown area with sewage, and they began to take the sewage out. Vineyard Haven was the third town to do something with their downtown area, to take the sewages out of the ponds, that bad sewage out of the pond areas, out of the beach areas, and then put it in their plant. What about Up Island? Does Up Island have the capacity Chilmark, West Tisbury, Aquina, to do the same thing, or do they need to do the same thing?
Well, I think that they haven't done it in Chilmark. Most of the people in Chilmark have wells
Right.
and septic systems that are
right.
on their property.
Right.
But I don't think there's any proposals to do what they did in Edgartown. I was in Edgartown because that's where we had our first house, very small house. But they came and they dug a trench and they ran the things out to the. So I was there when that happened, and that was really important to do that because we had flooding all the time, which went away when that happened. But I don't think there's any plans, at least for Chilmark that I'm aware of, that would try to go to a central system like that.
What about, because Chilmark 7 is 3 acres of land.
Yes.
So wherever your well is, as it borders your 3 acres, wherever your well is and your septic system is, okay, how does that water from the septic filter into the ground, and does it come out in any other water area that might affect somebody else's property, or how far is it from, like you take Abel's Hill. Now we know that one side of Abel's Hill is a good distance from the water. The other side of Abel's Hill is the pond's right there.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's all downhill. You know what I mean? So the water is running. How would you, as a Board of Health person, explain the necessity for people in that, at least in that area, to go along with your plan?
Well, I think one of the most important things is having your septic system drained and monitored on a regular basis. And what happens is there's called primary irrigation, and what happens is when the human waste goes into the septic, it's separated from the fecal matter versus the fluid, and the fluid runs out. But actually after that, they can actually destroy the fecal matter, the waste, and then you treat them with bacteria-killing agents that prevent that seepage that you're talking about from getting into the water supply or infecting anything. I mean, I know on our place the septic system is way in the front yard and the well is way in the backyard, so there's pretty distance between them. But those things have to happen on a regular basis.
So in other words, when the separation takes place, the fluid goes through the ground. Now we also know that the ground system itself acts as a cleansing system.
Correct.
You know what I mean? But it seems to me, as it begins to cleanse, that stuff still backs up, so it has to use more distance all the time to be cleansing. Is it a way, because I have a septic system, okay, but I have town water, so it never affects my town water.
Right.
I have town water. So I have two septic systems. One's an 8x8 and the other one's a 10x10. The 10x10 never gets full because it's just me and my wife. The 8x8, when we have a lot of company, flows over, but it never does anything. If people are seeing that by doing what you suggest is more beneficial, how would you supply the necessary equipment or tools to help the people? And now you got to understand, Chilmark, Aquina, parts of West Tisbury, the population is not like that in the wintertime. So many of those houses are empty. So therefore, by the time they come back in the spring, those septic systems are dry, nothing in them, just maybe leftover stuff. What do they need to do?
Well, one of the things is just to monitor the system itself, because as you point out, most of them are not, functioning year-round.
Right.
So you could monitor them, for example, when you come back to start your vacation here, have them checked. There are lots of good companies on the island who can check your septic system and say, well, this needs to be drained now, or this needs to be treated with chemicals, or whatever. But that's part of what the Board of Health does, is they monitor.
Right.
First of all, they approve septic systems when they're put in, and then they monitor them from time to time and make sure that they are complying with the regulations and not doing what you're suggesting might happen sometimes.
Would it benefit you, Chilmark, to have you on their board with your background, with your knowledge and understanding, And how would that benefit? How would you bring the rest of the island Board of Health together to look at these issues and collectively be willing to, let's do it together and work?
Well,
we know that in numbers, costs go down, a lot of individuals happen, we can do things together. And you're combating the disease from all angles.
Well, one of the things that I got involved with is working with the Aquina Board of Health.
Okay.
Jim Glavin.
Jimmy Glavin.
And Karen Colombo, who have just been super. And we set up testing for COVID, saliva tests and blood tests. So I got to know them very well and some of the functions of a Board of Health because they became actually very good friends of mine. And so I think absolutely we need to work at coordinating, just as you have suggested, all of the Board of Health on the island, and not to do anything by one Board of Health, but to get everybody to do it. And a good example of that is one of the other things I'm very interested in, and that's the tick infestation on the island.
You must have talked to Dr. Jacobs. You know Michael Jacobs?
Oh, very
Dr.
well.
Michael Jacobs?
Very well.
I did a TV show with him, and it was another gentleman, I can't remember his name, on ticks probably 10, 15 years ago, when Michael took a great interest in tick infestation on the vineyard and trying to eradicate that disease on the island.
Well, Dr. Hoxie was also very interested in that,
Hoxie,
who was a
good
great doctor and great man.
I loved him. We all loved
Me
Dr.
too,
Hoxie.
me too. And but here's the thing: there's a couple issues with the ticks. First of all, the Duke's Health Department has a tick program.
Right.
And part of the program is they come out and they would do a survey on the property. They say a $50 donation is appreciated, but if you can't do it, we'll do it for free. So first of all, they identify the ticks. And what's happening now is the deer tick and what's called the Lone Star tick, which are the two most prevalent ones and the most dangerous, are here now. But there's another thing that also is being suggested, and that's to do these tick tubes. And what happens is you buy these tubes, so many for your acreage, and you place them there, and the mice go into these tubes and come out. They don't die. They take this ingredient in these tick tubes back to their nest, and the larvae for the ticks die. Problem is that these are pretty expensive. There's like $150 a price.
For how many?
You know, for enough to do like an acre.
Okay.
But there's also an organization on the island run by a Mike Hugo, who actually has been on the island, who has a grant to allow people to get these and be reimbursed for them. So it's a way of connecting, people who have money for these grants to buy these tick tubes to actually get rid of the ticks. Another very interesting thing is,
but Kurt, $150 today. Most people, you live on Martha's Vineyard, you got $150. And to put that on, and a lot of people, see, the people that have more land are those that live in West Tisbury, Chilmark, and Aquina. Those of us that live in Vineyard Haven, Oak Bluffs, we're sitting on a half acre, maybe 3 acres. An acre of land in those towns is a big piece of land. Most of us don't have that. And we don't have the deer infestation as you have up in those areas. So I would say that if I lived up in that area, I'm buying that thing for $150 and I'm putting them out on my acreage.
Well, but my point is, if people, for some reason, don't want to spend that money, there is grants here that will reimburse them for that. And maybe it has to be more than that if they have more acres than that. But this is a way of solving it. But I was going to say something else that people might find interesting. There is a bird that eats the ticks called a hen. Oh, I'm breaking the name. It's like and the bird is extinct, but they're trying to bring it back.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about.
And if they bring it back, you could, for example, if you do it on your property, that's one thing, but all of these great trails that people walk on, they're not treated for the ticks.
No, they're not.
And that's where a lot of people get them. So these hens could be on those trails pecking away. The problem is that the skunks...
Heath hen.
That's it.
Heath hen.
Heath hen. You got
right.
I couldn't remember the name.
Right, heath hen.
Heath hen. That's exactly right.
Right.
And a guinea hen,
right.
both of them.
Right.
So, but the problem is that these skunks eat their eggs. So even if you created them, so you may have to get rid of the skunks too, which I'm not sure many people would have a problem with.
You have to call Walter Wolotica. He's the skunk man on the island.
He comes to my skunk.
Yeah,
he comes to my property at least once a year to take care of the skunks that are terrorizing my animals. Anyway, so there are solutions, but people again need to be educated about what they are, about the survey, about the tick tubes, and obviously the way to protect yourself if you're going to go walk on these trails. And people that come here for the first or second time who are not natives, they don't have an idea about it.
They don't know that.
Lyme's disease can be particularly devastating.
Exactly.
And some of the other diseases that are caused by these lone star ticks actually can kill people.
Oh yeah, well, Lyme disease does a good damage. You almost feel like you need to be dead before you can, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Your support up in Chilmark, has it been good for you to be running?
Yes, it has. In fact, I used to coach on the island. I coached women's soccer and boys soccer at the high school, and then I did these travel.
Did you really?
Yeah, and then I did travel.
Wait a minute, hold it. What years did you coach?
Okay, I retired in 2006, and I started coaching a boys' 13-year-old team. And then probably like 3 or 4 years after that, I was a JV coach for the boys. And then later on, I became an assistant coach for the girls. So I met a lot of really good people in doing that. And, a lot of the boys.
You must have, you probably had my granddaughter, Megan.
Last name?
Leland. Her name was Megan Leland at the time. I think Megsy.
Maybe
No, you wouldn't have. Because you know one thing? Meg went to the 8th grade in 2001, and she would have graduated in 2006, 6-5, and went to UNH. So you wouldn't have had her at the high school.
Yeah, I had a lot of really great kids, and just, to this day. So anyway, I know a lot of people from that experience, and so they have been very supportive.
I cannot believe you've been on the island that long, and we are just getting to know each other, and we're coming from the same neighborhood in New Jersey. That's unbelievable.
Well, my wife taught with you, and she admired you so much and said you were the best. She taught in Jersey City when I was in medical school. She taught in East Orange when I was in medical school.
East Orange.
And then taught at Derby Academy in Hingham when we lived there. And so she had a lot of principles, and she said you were the best.
Oh, I tell her I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Listen, what have we not talked about that you want to mention? And if you want to mention something specifically to the audience, speak into that camera.
Well, I think one of the issues...
And why should they vote for Kurt?
Okay, one of the issues is schools remaining opening or opening. Mm-hmm. And I saw a very interesting program last night where between kindergarten and 8th grade has been open in school all the time. Right. But after the April vacation, the high school is actually going to open for in classes rather than hybrid home learning. And I think that's so important, especially for the kindergarten to 8th grade, because that's the group that has suffered the most by home tutoring and hybrid learning. And it's very important that they be in the classroom. But there's a way to balance the risks of COVID versus the importance of that in-class thing. And the CDC has lots of good guidelines for that. And there's lots of programs around the country that have done this successfully from a safe point of view and for avoiding the COVID, and yet having the kids be able to learn in school. It's masks and 3-foot distancing and hand washing and all those things that are emphasized even in the school system. And one ray of hope is that kids between the age of 12 and 15 who get vaccinated have 100% assurance of not getting sick, not getting hospitalized, and not dying.
Bingo.
And that's an age group. I mean, these are the kids that want to play football and sport, contact sports, and where you're not, going to be able to show social distance. So that's an incredible.
And that helps the teachers out big time.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? That makes them feel safe, and it makes them feel encouraged to do their job better and to mingle with the kids.
Absolutely, and that's so necessary. I think we didn't realize how important that is for all that to happen in school environment.
Right.
I mean, it's logical. I mean, you
Right.
were a coach. You know how
Right.
important all those things
Right.
are to be able to do that.
Right. Listen, time has run out. This has been great. It's always good to see someone from the old guard, the old neighborhood. I want to wish you well.
Thank you.
And I tell you something. If Chilmark doesn't select you, I don't know what the next person that beats you has got to be a super person. You bring so much knowledge and benefit to the town.
Well, thank you
I
very
wish
much.
you well.
Thank you.
And you have an open invitation to Tank Talk anytime, Kurt. Anytime you want to come on to talk about certain issues, just give me a call.
Thank you very much.
And until next time, this is your host, Bob Tankard, saying good evening.